Hi, Kate Bennett here, Director of Music at the Presbyterian Church of Chestertown, Maryland. Today, I've been reflecting a little bit on the history of music at our church. I did a video about the handbells, and doing that history made me interested in how the history of music evolved at our church. So with the help of many, Carol at the church office and Lanny and Dal Holmes and Jim Conti, I've pieced together what happened. Lanny was there from the beginning, Lanny Parks, and she was the first accompanist and choir director for our church. And that was when they were at the Masonic Hall in Chestertown. There were 8 voices and piano. And then they moved to Philosopher's Terrace in Kent Circle. And there, Lanny believes there was a spinet piano and a donated organ. Now, Bill Griffin, church member who I was very lucky to know before he died, he reconditioned and rebuilt that organ. And I think that was the organ that came when we moved to Crestview, where we are now. The first worship service of our church was in September of 1985, which means this September, our church will be 35 years old. That's pretty cool. Let's see, George Clayman was the pastor at that point. There were 84 members. And then Amzie Parcell was hired as choir director via the Washington College Music Department. Amzie was one of my professors there, very knowledgeable instrumentalist and history professor, music history. There were 8 in the choir. Let's see, groundbreaking for the Crestview property was in December of 1991. And the first service at Crestview was October of 1992. And in 1994, Amzie Parcell resigned. And Jane and Bud Dengler, who had become members of the church shortly before, assumed music leadership. Jane as organist and Bud as choir director. They worked hard to find us a new organ. And I know Bud started communicating with Jordan Kit Music in June of 96. And in August of 96, the new organ was purchased. There we go. And this is the organ we have today. Yes, it's an Allen digital organ, MDS 41S. And it is a wonderful organ. Later in that year, Bud decided we needed more speakers, and those were also purchased. And if you stand in our sanctuary now, you can see on either side of the chancel on the high walls, there are speakers covered with fabric. And that's where you hear the organ from. So Amzie resigned, Bud and Jane assumed music leadership in 94, and the handbells were purchased in 99. And then Jane Dengler announced her retirement in 2002. So Bud and Jane were there a good while. The search committee looked for a new choir director, and they hired a gentleman from Pennsylvania named Jeff Schumann, and he and his wife were here, but I think he continued to live in Pennsylvania and commuted down here. And according to some, he wasn't happy that we'd never have a pipe organ, and he resigned after, he resigned in December 3rd, so he was only here from August to December 3rd. And then they had to figure out what to do. 2003, it says here that Sarah Holben and Dal Holmes seeked input from the handbell choirs to what they were going to do. And they decided they would share leadership, very Presbyterian. And they had ongoing practice and participation in worship and helped each other, lead each other. And later on in 2003, Jim Conti was hired as choir director. And Jim thinks he began in the fall of that year. And then they searched for an accompanist. Meanwhile, Jim had subs playing the organ and the piano for the choir, and they were Mary Betts, Ann Hoops, and Ann Turpin. And Mary Betts is the one who donated the Chickering baby grand piano we have in the sanctuary, which was made in 1902. I'm very fond of that piano. It's an old Chickering, and it's well loved. And so I remember reading the ad in the paper. This is in the summer of 2004 for an organist at the Presbyterian Church. And I applied, and I had to audition for the committee. And I was hired as accompanist and worked with Jim until November of 2009 when Jim resigned. And I became interim music director. And then in September of 2010, I was officially made music director / accompanist. And it became one position. And that's where we are today. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of the history of what went on in our church and the music. 35 years, pretty good. Always had a choir. Not bad. All right. Take care, everyone. Peace be with you.